Welcome to the True East podcast. I'm Doron Spielman. In this episode, we're going to explore Trump's Gaza plan that has taken the world by surprise. It's the first new idea in decades that breaks the paradigm and shifts the discussion away from what seems to be an almost cultish devotion to the tested, tried, and failed notion of the two-state solution. Just before October 7th, a study conducted in Gaza found that 33% of people living there were already interested in emigrating from the Strip. Given that today, after 15 months of war, the Strip is pretty much in ruins and will take years to rebuild, that number is likely higher, perhaps even significantly higher. The question is this the historic moment that Israel's been waiting for? If so, is it realistic? Can 2 million Gazans actually be moved and resettled? To what degree is the success of this plan reliant on Middle East countries who have typically ignored the plight of the Palestinians or even benefited from their ongoing plight? Will they be able to mark a 180-degree turnaround in order to support President Trump and his plan? To help us explore these questions and more in today's True East podcast, we will be joined by Dr. Mike Doran, one of the foremost experts in Middle East security and U.S. foreign policy. Mike is a senior fellow and the director of the Center for Peace and Security in the Middle East at the Hudson Institute in Washington, D.C. He previously served in the White House under President George W. Bush as a senior director in the National Security Council and has held key roles at the State Department and the Pentagon. He also co-hosts the Counterbalance podcast, where he breaks down the shifting dynamics of global security. Perhaps most importantly, Mike is a highly respected friend of Israel, of mine personally, and he is often sought out by those in the Israeli national security sphere for his down-to-earth analysis of the events shaping the Middle East. Mike, it's great to have you.
Great to be here.
Yeah. I want to take a step back and look at the first days of the Trump White House. You know, the first thing out of the gate for a president that ran on a platform of reducing American foreign involvement in foreign policy was, I think, taking over Greenland, Panama, the Panama Canal, perhaps making Canada the 51st state.
Yeah.
And on the way, but I think it's taken over, is Trump's Gaza plan. What is motivating Trump? We won't talk about the other three. That's a conversation in itself.
Well, we could combine them. How come the Gaza plan and Greenland aren't coming together?
That's right. They could use a bit of greenery.
Yeah.
So what is motivating Donald Trump, do you think, to right away out of the gates, when he has so much other stuff to deal with, to focus on this Gaza plan?
The Gaza plan, I think, this is just my supposition, I think he came up with it because he came under pressure from his supporters, particularly from the pro-Israel part of his constituency, because of the support for Biden's plan, the ceasefire plan in Gaza, which started. You know, he put out a tweet during the transition saying, "I want the hostages released by inauguration." And so, and then he sent Steve Witkoff to start as a special envoy to start the negotiations, and so Witkoff ended up working with the existing Biden plan. The only way that Trump's envoy could do this is if he was working together with the Biden administration, and it ended up being a Trump endorsement of the Biden plan, which upset a lot of people. I was down in Florida just at the time of the inauguration, speaking to a Jewish audience, and there was a lot of unhappiness, but muted because people were very happy that Trump was president, and they wanted to be in a joyous mood at the time of the inauguration. But there was an undercurrent of unhappiness with the ceasefire agreement, and so I think this was Trump's way of sending a signal to those supporters that no, this is not going to be an absolute continuation of the Biden administration. I have a different vision for Gaza. I have a different vision for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the Arab-Israeli conflict, and so on. So it was a bit of signaling more intentions to supporters than a kind of really considered plan about what to do about Gaza.
So I hear what you're saying. He basically was trying to set a new paradigm and move away from Biden, but he could have done that by saying, okay, which he did say, we're going to give unrestricted arms to Israel. But here, he put something on the table that is, messianic in its scope for Israelis. Do you think he was planning this level of change in advance?
No, I think it also made sense to him. I would, and of course this idea had been floating around in his circle before, so I think it definitely made sense to him. But I think he used it. I think he's very good at that, at changing, at changing paradigms, at changing discussions, at making himself the subject of discussion when everyone's talking about some other subject. I mean, look what happened. The minute he said it, everyone started talking about it.
Right, everybody's seeking shelter.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people are seeking shelter. People are figuring out trying to think about how to exploit it and so on. But it clearly had not been thought through. And there's, it was not to say that it wasn't an attractive idea to him, but from a government point of view, nobody else had been looped in. No studies had been done. No planning. Nothing like that.
So that's the Trump way, right? He can throw out something, but you think it's just is it a hot air balloon is it a weather balloon to check which way the winds are blowing so that, we've heard a lot from Steve Witkoff where he keeps saying that, and I quote him from last week, Witkoff said, when the president talks about this, it means he wants to shake up everyone's thinking.
I'm sure that's true as well. I'm sure that's an absolutely true statement. All of the standard answers to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict are false. I mean, they're not real answers. There's not going to be a two-state solution. This is not going to happen. The Israeli public after October 7th is dead set against it. Everyone. I mean, they had a vote in the Knesset, and all of the people that the Biden administration considers its strongest allies in Israeli politics either voted for or voted against the two-state solution, or managed not to be in the Knesset on the day of the vote, because it's totally unpopular. And from an American national security point of view, it's very important that Israel retain security control of the Jordan Valley and of the heights in Judea and Samaria. And that is unacceptable to the Palestinian Authority. So the two sides are just too far apart. And from a very practical point of view, the two sides are very far apart. And there's no clever diplomat, no amount of mediation is going to make them is going to bring them together.
So let me ask you, when I look at all the screens and the stuff going out in the news, there's one party I see that's saying very, very little about this entire thing, and it's the Israelis. You hear Trump, who brings out a plan. Bibi looks surprised, right? The prime minister looks surprised. You see kind of Steve Witkoff kind of pulling back a little bit, the White House spokesman pulling back a little bit, Secretary Rubio, somewhere in the middle. And then Trump goes back again and says, no, I actually mean what I'm saying, that they're going to leave Gaza and they're going to love it and they're not going to want to come back. And then I just want to play for you a quick recording from a recording of a conversation that President Trump had with Brian Kilmeade from Fox News the other day.
There's no scenario where there's a two-state solution anymore. I know Mike Waltz, your national security advisor, says there's no way Hamas is in charge there. So it seems like we're at the ultimate impasse. Your idea of taking over Gaza, making it more international, wasn't necessarily well received by Jordan or Egypt. So what's next, do you know?
Well, we pay Jordan and Egypt billions of dollars a year, and I was a little surprised they'd say that, but they did. And I'll tell you, the way to do it is my plan. I think that's the plan that really works, but I'm not forcing it. I'm just going to sit back and recommend it, and then the U.S. would own the site. It'd be no Hamas, and there'd be development, and you start all over again with a clean plate.
So if Trump is saying, I'm not going to force it, do you think he's taking a step back now from the plan?
A little bit, yeah. I assume he heard from the Saudis, from the Jordanians, from the Egyptians, among others, a very clear rejection. There's not a lot of give there, and he embarrassed the Saudis and when at the press conference when he suggested that this would lead to Saudi-Israeli normalization. So if the Saudis were to acquiesce in this in his plan, they certainly don't want to. They certainly don't want to suggest it that in order that this is the prelude to the normalization. I didn't say that very well, but you understand what I mean.
Yeah. I understand what you
it
mean.
embarrassed them for him to say that this is the route to get Saudi-Israeli normalization.
Because he put Saudi Arabia as the front runner? You mean he embarrassed them because he's preconditioning Saudi-Israeli peace on a resettlement plan for Gaza refugees?
Yes. I mean, the Saudi position is that the Saudis will consider normalization with Israel if there is an irreversible pathway to a two-state solution, and not they're not the Saudis, and no Arab country is talking about resettling Palestinians somewhere else.
But that leads us perhaps to an impasse, because if they're looking, if they, I know we're talking about Gaza, but if the Saudi plan is preconditioned on a full settlement of the Israeli-Palestinian issue, and we just acknowledge that a two-state solution is basically dead, then how does that leave an open doorway for peace with Saudi Arabia?
Well, there's wiggle room in the Saudi position, and that they say an irreversible pathway. So there's wiggle room there. One man's irreversible pathway is another man's blocked pathway. So there got to be some definition there that will take place. But secondly, I think the Saudi position hardened on this during the war because of the images of suffering Palestinians that they see on their televisions every night. So one could suggest that once the war is over, and the immediate raw emotions that it generated have subsided, that there'll be more flexibility in the Saudi position. But there's a problem there. We have to just be open about it. There's a clear problem there. And that's the problem that there has always been, that the Arabs and the Israelis are pretty far apart.
So I want to dive a little bit deeper into the plan. People are talking about the plan a lot. The title's the Trump's Riviera, right? There's fantastic emojis and gifs that are out there.
Gaza-Lago.
and everything else. And they're getting a lot of headlines, but very little is actually, I think, practically talked about. And I think the elephant in the room is Hamas.
Yeah.
I mean, Mike, can this be done without first taking out Hamas?
No, you have to defeat Hamas, and you have to defeat it as not just as a military organization, but you have to defeat it as the ruling element in Gaza. Doron, if I'm a Gazan and I want to go live in Albania or Somaliland or Mauritania or wherever the resettlement opportunity is going to be developed, the minute I raise my hand and say, "Take me," Hamas is going to kill me or kill my family. So until you eliminate that threat, you're not going to have any takers.
It sounds, we're getting the news reports that Hamas has rebuilt significantly in the last 49 days or 50 days since the first part of this hostage deal went through, and that they've recruited another 10,000 people. They've made billions of dollars taking foreign aid. There were pictures today from inside Gaza. The grocery store shelves are stocked. People are paying a lot of money for these goods, and these are Hamas groceries, right? This is not, your local Kroger's or whatever you want to call it in the United States. This is Hamas grocery stores are making a fortune.
Kroger, you showed you're from the Midwest.
Exactly. That's it. I gave it away to our listeners. Exactly. We both are from the Midwest. And Hamas has rebuilt their battalions. They've restructured. They've been purchasing. They've been renewing their weapons. Israel's probably set itself back, let's say, a series of months to try to regain territory. If Israel's going to go back in and try to regain territory, and at the same time begin to facilitate this plan without having these people get killed, it strikes me that this may be too big for Israel to do alone. I mean, you think we're going to need the U.S. on this?
I think Israel can do it if it decides that. I'm sure Israel can do it if it decides that it wants to do it and that it has. Well, when I say it, I'm talking about destroying Hamas. resettling Gazans elsewhere requires the United States. Israel doesn't have the power to induce countries to take this on, because they will come under pressure. A big chunk of the Arab and Muslim world is going to work against this. Iran will work against it. Perhaps other countries. I haven't followed closely what every country has said about it, but there will be an international coalition designed to foil this. So the only countries that are going to be able to accept the Gazans are going to be countries that are going to be backed strongly by the United States and feel that they can be protected. So the Israelis cannot do that without the United States, but the Israelis can certainly destroy Hamas without the United States. But they have to do for one reason or another, and I don't think I understand the full set of reasons. They have been hesitant to let's say cordon off a part of Gaza, filter the people in, and weed out Hamas as they vet people and bring them in, and without any Hamas activists, and then kill Hamas activists when they find them. That's what they have to do. You basically have to filter the population. I don't know why they haven't done it.
Do you think it will look different this time with Israel fighting Hamas with the Trump administration compared to the Biden administration? I mean, I don't know if even I realize the degree to which the Biden administration handicapped Israel on the previous campaign that we carried out.
It handicapped Israel in a number of ways, very, very serious ways. Number one, it put pressure on Israel not to go into Gaza. So not to go into Gaza at all on the ground, and then not to go into Gaza City, not to go into Khan Yunis, not to go into Rafah. The opposition to going in to Rafah round about, I can't remember, what was it, April? That really played out in front of the television cameras. There were signs about some of the other restrictions that the United States, or pressure the United States was putting on Israel before, but a lot of people didn't realize the full extent of it. There was also a de facto arms embargo. It was the Italian strike. They slow rolled the Israelis. They didn't openly say we're not providing arms, but the arms just didn't come. And then you had this other aspect of the policy, which hasn't gotten the attention it deserves, and that's the delegitimation of Israel, which took place, one, by demanding on day one that Israel provide basically an irreversible pathway to a two-state solution, and that it accept a revitalized Palestinian Authority. The Israelis were asked, what's your day-after plan on day one? Or, I don't know, 3 weeks after the war started, the Americans started saying publicly, what's your plan for the day after? What's your plan for the day after? That was meant to put to create a rift in the cabinet, and basically to bring down Netanyahu, because there's such a division of thinking even within the prime minister's coalition. There's a division of thinking about what should be the day after in Gaza. You know, during World War II, Truman and Eisenhower didn't start giving their plan for post-war Europe until they were in post-war Germany, even for that matter, until they were well on the way to completely defeating the Nazis. There are all kinds of reasons why you don't want to start talking about day after plans when you're trying to hold together a coalition designed to destroy an enemy.
So, Mike, if we play this out, and let's just say that the U.S. had succeeded, and they had brought down a Netanyahu government, or forced Bibi into doing something which the coalition would have fallen apart, and somebody else would have moved in his place. It could have been Gantz, it could have been Lapid, it could be Naftali Bennett, who knows? What was the U.S. driving for? I mean, are they looking for a post-Hamas Gaza, or?
No, there's no post-Hamas Gaza. They never had the goal of defeating Hamas. They couldn't have. They're not idiots. And they said they wanted all along a ceasefire. They were openly, by the time we got to April, the president was openly calling for a ceasefire and putting enormous public pressure on the Israeli government to get a ceasefire. If there's a ceasefire, then Hamas remains in power. They didn't openly say, we want Hamas to stay in power, but the effect of their policy was that Hamas would stay in power. The whole idea of a revitalized Palestinian Authority, that's to provide a veneer of internationally acceptable Palestinian leadership behind, a kind of Potemkin facade behind which stands Hamas. Just exactly like what we have in Lebanon, or in a manner analogous to what we have in Lebanon. In Lebanon, you have the legitimate Lebanese government behind which stands Hezbollah. The real power, everyone knows, the real power in Lebanon is Hezbollah, not the facade of the legitimate government. But we, in order to be true to our to the letter of our word that we're not going to negotiate with terrorists, we pretend to do our business in Lebanon through the Lebanese government. We know we know good and well that on all of the big stuff that we're trying to do in Lebanon, we're actually negotiating with Hezbollah, and we pick the intermediaries that we know have a direct line, had a direct line to Nasrallah.
So if the administration had its way, Israel would be living today, 15 months later, with a Palestinian Authority cover for a Hamas-run Gaza, once again a kilometer from our border.
Exactly. That was the vision. That was the vision.
Unbelievable.
But I'll make it worse for you, though. That was part of a larger regional vision in which the United States was reaching an accommodation with Iran. So that because this only works. Look, if you're going to have, there was a lot of talk, at the end of the toward the end of the Biden administration, from April on. I don't know when it started, but let's say April for sure, of having some kind of pan-Arab force. So you're going to have Emirati policemen. And it's an international force, but Gaza is going to be policed by Emiratis, let's say. If you're the United Arab Emirates, living a small, very vulnerable polity just across the Persian Gulf from Iran, are you going to go put your soldiers on the ground in Gaza to have a conflict with Hamas, knowing full well that could put you on the opposite side of Iran? No way. You're not going to do that. And the Americans know that. So the only way you get a pan-Arab force is if you have Iran's acquiescence and agreement. So that's what the Americans were quietly negotiating with Iran over the heads of the Israelis in order to get an international agreement about what Gaza should look like.
If there is a Trump plan right now that is going to be unique, that would potentially bring about a resolution to this problem, why are we not hearing anything from Israel except a little bit of lip service? The Bibi, Prime Minister Netanyahu said it's a great plan. It's a plan like no other plan that we've seen. And you have Defense Minister Katz, who also said something. But in general, Israel's been quiet.
Well, there are two Trump initiatives going on simultaneously. One is the Witkoff mediation for the ceasefire hostages agreement. And that, I think, is going to take precedence for the Israelis right now, if we think about sequencing. The two also, I think, kind of contradict each other. On the one hand, you're asking Hamas to make a deal, which the framework of the Biden agreement in the three stages is basically a deal that calls in the end for Israel to withdraw from the Gaza Strip, and a permanently, and that will leave Hamas in power. So on the one hand, we have the Trump initiative to destroy Hamas and move all the Gazans out, and on the other hand, we have the Trump initiative in the form of the Biden plan to leave Hamas in power. So they contradict each other. And the issue of the hostages here is so emotionally fraught, and it's really the priority of the government here. So I think the focus of the Israelis at the moment is just on following the logic of the hostage negotiations as far as they can, and the other thing won't even begin until after that.
That makes sense because we just heard Witkoff say that the goal right now is to extend phase one, right? It's kind of this phase one part B.
Yeah,
because phase two.
So they're now rewriting the Biden plan, or at least talking about rewriting the Biden plan. Of course, Hamas is going to be against that.
Right. I mean, people often forget that the other side of this plan is that Hamas is benefiting. Yeah. We're benefiting from, of course, the hostages coming home, which is not only a national priority, a family priority. But on the other hand, Hamas, the longer this drags out, there's no question, Hamas will regroup quickly and become an entity that will be that much more difficult to dislodge Not to mention Hamas are not a bunch of idiots. I mean,
Not at all. They're very clever.
They're very clever. They outplayed us.
They're very clever, and they've been playing this game a long time. And on top of the hostage game, and understanding how you can squeeze the Israelis, and I mean this is the one play that they have. So they think about it all the time. Israel and the United States, they're distracted. They have a lot of things going on. Hamas has just one goal.
I'll go survive.
Yeah, survive and cause pain.
And cause pain. If we're not going to unfortunately solve the hostage crisis in this interview, and we'll see where phase 2 goes. Trump obviously understands this because he called for that high noon resolution where it was either bring all the goods to the table or don't. But if we do look again, if we drill back down into a potential Gaza deal of moving Palestinians or giving them the ability to move themselves, how is this actually going to take place? If we're saying Egypt and Jordan are not going to be players to this, Saudi is offended. There's been Puntland, which is almost impossible to find on the map, and Somalia, which is
Somaliland, I think.
Somaliland, I'm sorry, which is northwestern Somalia, which is also extremely its own independent, controversial entity. There was some speak about Morocco, but you've got 22 Arab countries. You could send 100,000 of which to each country, but
Theoretically, but they're not going to take them.
they're not going to take them because why would they? They never. So where are they going to go? What are the options here? Do you have any ideas?
No, I don't. I've been waiting to see who's going to raise their hand and say, President Trump, I want to help you out. I'm not. I wouldn't say that no one is going to, but it's going to be a fight, and there's going to be the countries that do accept them are going to expect something in return. And what's that going to be? I don't know. I think we should we should look at all the countries that have recognized Palestine. Ireland, Sweden. No, not Sweden. I'm sorry. Spain. Who else?
The EU. The entire EU is recognizing Palestine as a state.
I'm drawing a blank all of a sudden.
But if there's going to be a fight, and this isn't the first plan, people may not realize there's been other plans for resettling.
Slovenia. I was trying to think of Slovenia.
Slovenia.
Okay, yeah. I doubt any of those countries. I doubt the Irish are going to be begging for their portion.
Right. For the Irish, they'll claim that they're Israelis and they don't want them to accept Israelis. So, there's been other plans in the past, right? There was plans just after 1948. There was a plan to move the Palestinian refugees to Syria. I know John Foster Dulles had a plan in exchange for water to move them, and Condoleezza Rice even had a plan, and there was the head of the UN at one point had offered a plan that the Arab countries should take them in return for oil revenue. None of those plans worked. And maybe this plan will work, but what type of leverage how far do you think Trump's gonna move to take this?
I'm skeptical, to be honest with you. I'll be happy to be proven wrong. I'm not staking my reputation on this, but I suspect that 4 years from now, when a new president is sworn in, we're going to have about 1.8 million Gazans in Gaza, maybe a few less. But this is the amount of the lift that this requires. It makes me skeptical. I'll believe it when I see it.
Do you think Israel, there's been stuff in the news that Israel is taking practical steps, created a commission in order to try to move forward with this deal. If there's not strong U.S. backing, and if you're doubtful if it happens now, when could this ever happen?
I think the Israelis should pursue it as far as it will go and see if it's doable. Look, you can't do anything that Israel wants to do in Gaza. Whatever the universe of solutions from the Israeli acceptable solutions for Israel, you first have to kill Hamas. You have to destroy it. It's not destroyed. So they should focus on that. That should be step one. And then, I guess bring the hostage home through this negotiation is step one. Step two, destroy Hamas. And while doing that, through negotiations with the United States, pursue the possibility of resettlement. And if some of them are resettled, it's good for everyone. I agree with Trump. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people who are living on the beach in Mawasi would prefer to be in Somaliland if they can live there safely.
I mean, we know the incredibly in-depth poll that was done by hundreds and hundreds of Gazans by Gazans before October 7th said that 33 back then, before the war, 33% of them already said that they would be interested in moving.
Who wouldn't?
And now
It's
Gaza's
a hell.
destroyed.
It's a hellhole.
It's a hellhole that will take best case scenario will take 10 years to rebuild. Yeah. And so, it's ironic that Europeans.
I don't believe all I don't believe that the spirit of jihad beats in every Gazan breast, and they want to hold on, stay on the land, come what may. If they could get out of there and know that there's not going to be any retribution, then a lot of them would like to leave, I'm sure.
I mean, I would feel just obviously it's in Israel's interest, but you often hear these things. Gaza's an open air prison, which in itself is ridiculous because Gaza's had a border with Egypt since Israel pulled out of Gaza in 2005, and Gazans, 250,000 of them left via Egypt, not to come back, and hundreds of thousands of them exited via Egypt on trips and did come back, and so it wasn't a close. But if there's a claim that Gaza is an open-air prison, then, as you mentioned, all of these countries that support the Palestinians, this is their opportunity to have some sense of choosing where their life's going to go.
If it's a prison, then Hamas is the jailer. That's the thing. But look, there's enormous hypocrisy about this question. People, countries don't actually want the Palestinians. The Arab countries don't, because they kicked all the Palestinians out after the Gulf War from the Gulf because they supported Saddam Hussein. They don't want an element, a self-conscious element inside their country that's agitating for interests, agitating for outside powers, which is what happens when you have Palestinians. And a lot of them don't care that much about the suffering of the Palestinians. They don't care as much about that as they care about taking Israel down a notch.
There are two misconceptions that I feel have not been brought up during this entire thing, and it's a shame. I almost bite my fingernails every time I hear someone talk, including Israelis who support this plan and President Trump. The first is historical precedent. Right. This wouldn't actually be the first time that people have been resettled in other areas.
Yeah, they've been resettled, and there's also been war that has moved people. I mean, we've seen that some 10 million Syrians were moved by the violence in Syria since 2011. They're not all going back. No way. So people move all the time.
And I know post-World War II, right? Germany, there was Konrad Online in Germany who was supporting the Sudeten Germans in Czechoslovakia. And he actually asked Hitler to invade Germany. Hitler invaded Germany, of course, in 1930. Hitler invaded Czechoslovakia in 1938. And then, of course, when they lost the war, there were 3 million Sudeten Germans that were forced out of that territory.
In the Soviet Union, they moved population all the time. Stalin had all kinds of relocation projects to shift the demographic balance within the Soviet Union. After World War I, the Greeks and the Turks exchanged population. This is not it happens all the time. Like I said, it's not. I don't find it. I don't find it to be. What do you call it? Inhumane. On the contrary, look at the conditions that people are in right now. Why the fact that they are not allowed to leave, to migrate away from the violence, is itself inhumane.
I'm curious to get your take, and here it's a question that I often hear sent around, and this is the other perhaps misconception. We often make a differentiation between Hamas and the Gazan people. And
I make that distinction. I make my Israeli friends upset when I do that, but I do.
So I'm curious to hear, because when I've been in Gaza. I've been in Gaza during this most recent war. I was in Gaza in 2009 during Kasled. I was in Gaza in 2005 during the disengagement with my friends. I was in the military when, unfortunately, I was there as I witnessed them being taken out of their homes, and I was supposed to be some type of spokesman for that event, which I found very difficult. Back then, when we left in 2005, 2 years later, the Gazans voted in Hamas, right? They voted in Hamas in 2006 it was. Hamas then eliminated the Palestinian Authority, and the ranks have swelled by tenfold by Gazan people, right? And so I'm curious, I want to push back on that. If there are so many Gazans that have filled the ranks of Hamas and UNRWA workers and everything else, is there really a distinction?
Yeah, I think there is. Look. The most important thing is, do I know what's in the heart of every Gazan? I don't know. But I've spent a lot of time around people, and this would be a unique population sample if every person in that space agreed with every other person about everything, and had exactly the same commitment to the. I was once on an airplane sitting next to a Gaza. I had a ultra Orthodox Jew to my left, and I had a Gazan to my right. This is years ago. It was in the late '90s, and we had a conversation among us, which was hilarious because the ultra Orthodox guy was from London, and he lived in a closed world. He didn't know anything about politics, about guy. He knew that Gazans hated Jews. This is all. And the Gazan guy was very funny to talk to because he was very cynical about all political slogans, and he said a couple of times, look, they say that Hamas is saying that this is happening, but do I know this is true? I don't even know what's happening one street over from me, right? So, look, Hamas has the monopoly on power. If you go out and you say what's really in your heart, and it's not I love Hamas, you get kneecapped, and we see it all the time in public. They have control over every means of employment in Gaza. So if you are just a person who wants a quiet life and doesn't want to be involved in politics, you have no choice but to mouth support for Hamas. There's no opposition to it. But if they were given the option of getting the hell out, I'm sure a lot of them would take the option of getting the hell out, even if they, in their hearts, they still think that Hamas is right. They're not necessarily going to love Jews, but not everyone who hates the Jews wants to take up arms against them or wants to lose their life for that. That's the key question. When we say that everyone in Gaza is Hamas, does that mean that every one of them wants to lose their life, wants to go on the battlefield? I don't think so. It's not in human nature. And what Israel needs to do is separate that group of people who don't want to pick up arms against Israel and those who do. And that is a doable proposition. By the way, when I was in government in the Bush administration, I was in the Defense Department, and we had 26,000 Iraqis who were detained for picking up arms against the United States. And we did some very serious polling of the detainees. And you know what the number one reason was why they picked up arms against the United States?
Nope.
Take a guess.
The number one reason why the Iraqis picked up arms against the United States?
Yeah, against Americans.
They felt that we were occupying their land?
No, they were paid.
Okay.
That was the number one reason. And the number two reason was a specific grievance against the United States, like an American bomb dropped on their house, or it was only when you got down, I can't remember what all of them were, but it was only when you got down to 4 or 5 that you got to the to actually supported the ideology.
I think that what we're looking at now, and this is going to play out over the next month or two, I think, as you said, phase 2 of this deal, which calls for Israel to permanently leave the Gaza Strip, and Hamas are not idiots, and therefore they're not going to give up all the hostages unless they are 100%.
They're never going to give up all the hostages.
They may never give up all the hostages.
It's the ace in the hole. That's all they have.
And nobody wants to speak it. No one wants to say it because of how emotional it is, but that's the reality. If they gave up all the hostages,
I know it is terrible to say. It's terrible to say. I mean, if I were, if I had a loved one that was there, I don't know how I would feel hearing someone like me say that. But we have to see with very clear eyes who those people are and what they're doing, what their goals are. And the minute they give up the last hostage, then Israel's going to smash them. They know that.
Exactly. And every almost the as long as we delay this and we want to bring home all the hostages, we do lose a footing with perhaps this Trump plan. As time goes on, you have a United States president that's very, very motivated. He's willing to apply pressure. And if Israel waits too long and the ship sails, this ship may never come around again.
It's a window of opportunity, even if it isn't fully realized. It's still an opportunity, and Israel should do everything it can to see how far it can go with this.
Mike, I want to thank you very much for your in-depth analysis on Gaza. It's a real pleasure to have you here in Israel, and you're a great friend of Israel, Mike. And what I love is that you don't just agree with Israelis. You push back, and I think it's very healthy for us to understand your viewpoint because you come from the side of the administration, from the side of the United States and Israel. As we said, we have to know who our friends are and what our friends think in the U.S.
I'm glad you brought that up because let me clarify. I want Israel to win. I want Israel to win, and I want it to win big. And I think that some of the ideas that the Israelis have get in the way. They get in the way of taking the immediate steps today that are going to be most likely the route to victory.
I look forward to us getting together and discussing this on the other side of success, hopefully soon.
Me too.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
As we've heard, the events of the next few months may determine the future of Israel and the Middle East for decades or longer. For that and more, stay tuned to the True East podcast. I want to thank Dr. Mike Doran, JNS, and all of our technical team, and thank you for joining. This is True East, and I'm Doron Spielman.